Tonight, White House battle, the president and attorney general versus Congress. Why a struggle over the upcoming census might lead to contempt of Congress for William Barr.
The 2020 fight for president, how Christians could have a huge impact on the vote.
And fighting for the heroes of 9/11. The response from lawmakers after comedian Jon Stewart's emotional plea to Congress.
All that and more tonight on Faith Nation.
And welcome to Faith Nation. I'm Jenna Browder.
I'm Eric Phillips, in for John Jessup tonight. From the aftermath of the Mueller report to a citizenship question on the 2020 census, lawmakers had their hands full on Capitol Hill today.
They did. The president's son was also there to talk to the Senate Intelligence Committee. CBN News White House correspondent Ben Kennedy joins us to break it all down. Ben?
Well, Jen and Eric, this is Don Jr.'s second time before the committee. We are told his questions were limited in scope and in time. This as his dad used executive power to stop lawmakers from getting documents related to the upcoming census.
Are you here to correct your testimony?
Nothing to correct it.
President Trump's son returned to Capitol Hill after lawmakers issued a subpoena for him following the release of the Mueller report.
The president's efforts to make money from a real estate project in Moscow and to conceal the transaction from the public are a quintessential example of a counterintelligence nightmare that may or may not include criminal activity.
The real purpose of the Mueller dossier, however, was to help Democrats impeach the president.
In another hearing room, a discussion on whether to hold Attorney General William Barr and Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross in contempt for refusing to turn over documents related to the White House's decision to add a citizenship question to the 2020 census. The Supreme Court now must decide if the question to find out the citizenship of every person in the country will appear on next year's census.
I think it's totally ridiculous that we would have a census without asking.
But President Trump claimed executive privilege to block Congress's access to the documents.
So the Supreme Court, no, I'm certainly not hiding anything. Supreme Court has already heard the arguments. They read the briefs a very long time ago in the census case.
They both refused to comply with duly authorized subpoenas issued by this committee that require them to produce documents relating to the addition of the citizenship question to the 2020 census against the advice of experts.
Republicans criticized the hearing as a waste of time.
Democrats know the Supreme Court will rule by the end of this month on the citizenship question, but they hope to use this committee's oversight power to create a controversy around this issue, try to impact the court's decision.
Now, Democrats fear the citizenship question will reduce census participation in immigrant-heavy countries. We now wait for communities, that is. We now wait for the House vote on contempt, which has been delayed. Eric, Jenna?
And Ben, the president also made some news today concerning the military and Poland. What exactly did he have to say about that?
Well, Eric, President Trump said he is considering moving upwards of 2,000 additional troops into Poland, but added the final decision has not been made. The U.S. has been increasing military activity in Europe along with NATO allies. Poland is also interested in buying more than 30 fighter jets from the U.S. as well. Eric, Jenna?
Ben Kennedy at the White House, thank you very much. To the campaign trail now, where presidential candidate Pete Buttigieg made a stop on the president's home turf.
Fresh off his foreign policy speech Tuesday night, the South Bend, Indiana mayor joined clergy and progressive activists in Lafayette Park, just steps outside the White House, for an interfaith rally dubbed a national call for moral revival.
We are not here to talk about left versus right. Amen. Those are false religious categories, and we call on the media to stop using them when you talk about religion. We're not here to talk about Democrat versus Republican. Amen. We are not here as the liberal religionists against the conservative. Those are not religious categories. We are here to talk about right versus wrong.
The group said they came together as a prophetic witness against the president's policies, which they see as morally wrong.
And while Buttigieg plays up the topic of faith, most conservative evangelicals do continue to back President Trump.
Yeah, and a new poll that just came out is good news for the commander-in-chief. A survey conducted by Public Opinion Strategies shows the president with an 83% job approval rating among white evangelical Christians. In the 2016 election, 81% of that same group supported Trump at the ballot box, a big reason for his presidential victory.
And joining us now to discuss is CBN's chief political analyst, David Brody. David, what do you think? Do these numbers surprise you at all?
No, they don't, for a lot of reasons. First of all, this president has delivered more for evangelicals than really evangelicals who voted for Trump thought he was going to do. I mean, they thought he'd be good. They didn't think he'd be great. They thought he'd be an A. I think they see an A-plus president here. But there are some concerns moving forward. He's got to have to make sure, the White House is going to have to make sure that that 81% figure that he won with in 2016 stays pretty solid in 2020.
And to that point, is there any danger that the president could take that white evangelical advantage, for granted?
Well, absolutely. Though, I will tell you, Donald Trump will always project confidence, and he'll always say, for sure, this is going to be fine. Evangelicals, how could they not vote for me because of everything I've done for them? The problem is he goes to Twitter, if you've heard, and he has some unsavory language, and so the way he sometimes acts a little unpresidential, a lot of folks would say. So I think that has turned off a lot of suburban women, men. But the point is that even some evangelicals who were with him in 2016 do not like what he has done in terms of not looking and acting, more importantly, presidential.
David, you were at the Buttigieg rally today, and you ran into the candidate. Just a few seconds here, but do you think a candidate like him and some of these Democrats can win over faith voters with progressive policies?
They're going to sure try. The problem is they're working in a limited pool. Progressive, religious left folks out there, they're fervent, but they're small. And he's got to play in the bigger evangelical conservative pool, and that's where Biden may make some hay. Buttigieg is going to try to play there, though, as well.
All right, David, stick around. We'll talk to you again.
Sounds good, guys.
Well, former Vice President Joe Biden was in Iowa again today, the Democratic frontrunner, courting voters in the Hawkeye state and taking aim at President Trump. Yesterday, the two went at it, Biden calling Trump an existential threat to America. Trump had his own choice words for the former vice president, too, calling Biden a loser who is slower than he used to be.
And Democratic presidential hopeful Bernie Sanders was stumping at George Washington University today. Sanders defended what he calls democratic socialism, where he says there's more even distribution of resources and wealth with programs like Medicare for All. Sanders told the crowd he hopes to finish what President Franklin D. Roosevelt started more than 80 years ago with the New Deal. In his speech, he even invoked the words of Martin Luther King Jr. Sanders is a distant second in the polls behind Democratic frontrunner Joe Biden.
Well, new polling shows many of these Democratic candidates beating President Trump in a general election matchup.
That's right. In a new poll from the Quinnipiac University, it shows Biden beating Trump by 13 points if the election were held today. Bernie Sanders leading Trump by 9 points, Kamala Harris by 8, and Elizabeth Warren by 7 points.
And Tim Malloy with Quinnipiac joins us now to discuss. Tim, thanks for joining us.
Happy to be here.
Tim, what else did you find in this poll?
Well, it's the first time we've done the actual head-to-head between the president and the top candidates who are Democrats who are running. And what was really revealing was that Sanders, Harris, Warren, Buttigieg, and Booker would all beat the president if the election were held today. Big caveat on that. We're 17 months out. Polls are a snapshot in time that can change. And it also showed that Vice President Biden would beat him resoundingly by a landslide if the election were held today. Take it all with a grain of salt, but that's where it stands right now.
Well, we know the economy is an important factor for voters. What effect does the economy have on the president's numbers?
I should add that it's a good question. It helps all the time. He's up to 42%. That's the second highest number he's gotten since we've been polling the president for the last year and a half. The economy is sturdy. People have money in their wallets. This is something the president can and will campaign on. So, yes, it's a big part of this.
Tim, Quinnipiac is out today with another poll we wanted to talk about. This one about whether or not Congress should begin the process of impeaching President Trump. What did you find?
We found that Americans resoundingly, by very large margins, do not want this to proceed, do not want the president impeached. Now, there's a lot of different reasons for it. It's a complicated situation, but the bottom line is, and we asked thousands of Americans, they don't want this to happen.
And Tim, what else did you find interesting in the poll?
I think what was interesting, the downside for the president with the poll we're talking about today is that a lot of Americans, the majority, believe that the Mueller investigation did not answer all of the questions, that the president possibly committed a crime or certainly did something untoward. So it's really not, the president's saying it's settled, but in the minds of Americans, it is not totally settled yet.
All right, Tim Malloy with Quinnipiac, thank you for joining us.
Happy to be here.
And David is back with us now and joining the conversation, Julia Manchester, political reporter with The Hill. Julia, thanks for being here.
Thank you for having me.
First question to you. What do you make of the 2020 candidates so far? You're covering it for The Hill. Who do you see having real momentum?
Well, right now, obviously, Biden seems to have the momentum. Biden has that name recognition. He's an alum of the Obama administration, which we know is extremely popular within the Democratic Party. But the one candidate I'm really watching right now is Elizabeth Warren. I think after her launch in the late 2018, early 2019, I think a lot of people wrote her off. She had a bit of an awkward Facebook Live interview that didn't go over too well. However, she's really been able to differentiate herself from the other candidates through these various detailed policy proposals. While the other candidates have released a good number of policies, they haven't been able to go as in depth as she has. And she's been such a master at communicating them. And I think right now her first task is really cutting into that progressive vote that Bernie Sanders has right now. He's a distant second behind Biden, but we see that Elizabeth Warren in polling is inching up to Bernie, and that's something that the Sanders camp and the Biden camp should be looking at.
Yeah, and talking about those numbers, are those polling numbers that the White House seems to be a little concerned about? Should they be?
Yeah, I mean, I think they should be a little bit concerned. It's early, but there are a couple things to remember here. First of all, this is a national poll, the poll that we just cited, the big one that everybody's talking about. State polls are more important than national polls. That's number one. Number two, you have to understand how these polls are weighted. And I took a deep dive this morning. It took me like an hour, and I've got a headache, I'll be honest with you, because of it. And it's all about how they're weighted. So, for example, 58% of Americans do not have a college degree. So the question is, did the poll reflect that? Were the people that they were polling also 58% not have a college degree? Guess what? Yes. They didn't have a college degree as well. I was wondering if there'd be a difference in there. Because in 2016, the problem with the polling is that they didn't weight it the correct way. More non-college whites came out and voted for Trump than they had predicted or they had thought. In this poll, though, that's the bad news for Trump. They're actually right in this poll in terms of the census numbers that we have today.
Julia, Biden and Trump both going head-to-head, both choice words for each other. While they're doing this, while they're throwing mud at each other, does this open them up to attacks from these candidates who are coming up in the polls?
Well, I think every time President Trump attacks Biden, the Biden campaign is cheering behind closed doors. They want that because it shows that Trump is threatened by Biden and sees Biden as a very formidable opponent. He's not giving that same kind of oxygen to the Bernie Sanders or the Pete Buttigieg's right now at this moment. And I think Biden, this is kind of fitting in perfectly with their campaign strategy. You don't see Biden going after the other Democratic opponents right now while they're bashing him in Iowa. He's going after Trump instead. So I think, the ongoing rift between Biden and Trump right now is a plus for the Biden campaign.
Yeah, almost like a two-man fight already, but it's still very early.
Absolutely.
But let's talk about Bernie Sanders. He today was defending his democratic socialism, what it means to him. How do you think that's resonating? And this is for both of you. How do you think that's resonating with voters?
Well, it depends what kind of voter you speak to. I think as a young, for young progressive liberals, I think that's great. And I think they really do connect with that kind of message. And we saw that democratic socialists such as Alexandria Ocasio-Cortez Cortez and other congresswomen such as Rashida Tlaib, Ayanna Pressley, maybe not exactly Democratic socialists, but more progressive. Absolutely. They've been able to ride that wave of, progressivism within the Democratic Party. However, there are more moderate Democrats that you see candidates like Pete Buttigieg or maybe John Hickenlooper trying to very much appeal to. So it depends kind of, what voter you're speaking to. I think the debates and the reaction to the debates and more polling will really show how the Democratic electorate actually feels about democratic socialism. But right now, it seems pretty split.
And I would just quickly say that, look, when it comes to millennials, who doesn't love free stuff? But especially millennials, right? And they got a lot of college debt, and along comes Bernie Sanders and Elizabeth Warren saying, hey, I'll free you of all of it. That's number one. But the Great Recession of 2008, don't miss that, because there, big banks failed, and millennials all of a sudden said, hey, wait a minute. Maybe I need to rely a little bit more on the government, not as much on big business. I think that's really important. We'll see how it plays out. I have absolutely no clue.
All right, David, Julia, we have to leave it there. Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, coming up, we follow up on comedian Jon Stewart's emotional plea to Congress and how it's impacting the heroes of 9/11.
After an emotional hearing on the Hill Tuesday, a House panel passed a bill authorizing more money for the 9/11 first responders.
Abigail Robertson joins us from Capitol Hill on how a fired-up Jon Stewart thrust this issue into the national spotlight. Abigail?
That's right. Comedian Jon Stewart was anything but funny on the Hill this week as he demanded Congress, quote, do their job and take action on health care compensation for 9/11 first responders.
You are ignoring them.
In a room full of first responders,
Never forget what they did, what they gave to this country. Well, here they are.
Stewart chastised House members for not doing enough to compensate the brave heroes who rushed to save fellow Americans while exposing themselves to sickness and radiation.
They responded in 5 seconds. They did their jobs with courage, grace, tenacity, humility. 18 years later, do yours.
At issue, the First Responder Medical Compensation Fund that's running out of money.
We are all worried about our children and spouses and our families if we are not here.
Causing first responders like Louis Alvarez, facing his 69th chemo treatment, to worry if they're running out of time.
You all said you would never forget. Well, I'm here to make sure that you don't.
The bill was last renewed in 2015 for $4.6 billion and is expected to pass the House, then head to the Senate.
Gosh, I hadn't looked at that lately. I'll have to. We've always dealt with that in the past in a compassionate way.
So far, 22,000 victims have been paid, but there are roughly 95,000 who could be eligible. And an estimated 400,000 New Yorkers were exposed to toxic dust.
The good news is that they've said that, of course, the benefits will be there.
The new bill appropriates whatever funds are necessary and doesn't expire until 2090. But if Congress doesn't pass it, the current fund will run out of money in 2020, cutting benefits by as much as 70%. Back to you, Jenna and Eric.
All right, Abigail Robertson, thank you very much.
Coming up next, the Word becomes art, a father and son's artistic effort to bring the Bible to the masses.
Well, not a sight you see every day on the National Mall here in Washington. The entire Bible was on display, and it wasn't just words on pages.
As Paul Strand reports, the Bible came to life thanks to the unique vision of a German painter.
Imagine every single part of the Bible illustrated by a professional painter, and then all those paintings lined up next to each other and going all the way around the reflecting pool on the National Mall.
They say a picture's worth 1,000 words. Well, so then what are 3,333 pictures worth? In this case, the entire Bible.
German painter Willy Wiedmann put many years of his life into this project. The head of the Museum of the Bible was excited to see it all displayed at once.
It's the world's longest Bible, arguably the world's longest illustrated book. And this is a chance for us to show it off to the district and to the nation.
The painter's son came all the way from Germany for the mile-long display and to represent his father's vision.
There are more than 1 billion people illiterate, people who can't read and write, and that's one way for them to engage with the Bible through visuals.
He believed that about a third of the world's population either couldn't read or couldn't learn through words. They had to learn pictorially. And that was his motivation to spend 16 years of his life to create this amazing Bible.
The world might never have seen this treasure. The painter didn't even tell his own family about it.
It was a total surprise when I discovered it.
It was Martin and his family who discovered all the work their father had done.
Well, he put it away in 4 big aluminum cases, which I found after he died in his attic.
Wiedemann borrowed from many schools of art: surrealism, cubism, abstract expressionism. It led to a whole different look for biblical subjects.
He never wanted God to have a face or a gender, and so God is always represented as a triangle coming from the top of the page.
We're used to thinking of Jesus looking a certain way from all those Renaissance paintings. Wiedemann definitely had a style of his own. Like here's Jesus washing his disciples' feet and at the Last Supper.
Jesus is always represented with this crazy blonde hair. Don't know why.
But no matter how people felt about the style, it was one massive biblical wonder to behold.
To have a mile-long picture around the reflecting pool in form of a Bible, I mean, this is unheard of.
Paul Strand, CBN News, the National Mall.
What a remarkable piece of art and Christian history. You can see the Wiedemann Bible for yourself. It's on display at the Museum of the Bible in Washington, D.C. through September.
Up next, another week, another embassy. Which country may be following the United States' lead and moving their embassy to Jerusalem? There's chaos on the streets of Hong Kong. Take a look at this video. Police in riot gear deploying tear gas and rubber bullets at protesters angry over the so-called extradition bill. That proposal would allow Hong Kong to extradite criminal suspects to mainland China. Supporters say it keeps Hong Kong from becoming a safe haven for criminals. But critics contend it will likely be used to stifle civil liberties and pro-democracy advocates.
The Eastern European nation of Moldova may join a growing list of countries moving their embassies from Tel Aviv to Jerusalem. The move comes after turmoil in the country over who is the rightful leader following February's election. The acting president made the decision to move the embassy this week. If the declaration holds, Moldova will be the first European country to move its embassy to Jerusalem. And that is going to do it for us tonight on Faith Nation.
Have a great evening.